Okay. I think science is a good method. It's only good if we honor the way science is designed. Science is meant to be updated when new discoveries are made. Those new discoveries must be incorporated into the existing belief systems. That's where the system is breaking down today. That's where we began today. New discoveries, they're not being reflected in mainstream media, classrooms, textbooks. Teachers are losing their jobs for even suggesting there are alternative theories to some of our most cherished beliefs. Okay? So, I think we're on the wrong track. Now, there are many false assumptions that science has made. I'm going to share 5 of them with you, and then I'm going to ask for your permission to eliminate a couple of them real quickly. Okay? Let's do this. If you're in school today, if you have young people in school, when I was in school, we were taught that evolution explains life and it explains human life. If you're in school today, or your kids are, we're taught that civilization began about 5,000 years ago at the beginning of this cycle, and that it happened once, that it's linear, primitive to sophisticated. We're being taught that consciousness is somehow separate from our physical world, that the space between everything is empty, between me and you, that there's nothing there, and that nature is based on what is called survival of the strongest. If you're taking notes, don't even waste your time. Just make a couple of scribbles and then call these false assumptions and put one of those through it. Because every one of these is scientifically false. Every one of these, and this isn't just new thought, peer-reviewed journals, peer-reviewed, that's accepted in the scientific circles. The mainstream refuses, or at least is reluctant, in some cases is absolutely refusing, to carry these in the way the teachings are. Now, here's why this is important. The way that we think of ourselves obviously is important. Okay, the way we think of ourselves, how life began, where human life comes from, our relationship to our body. You know, are we separate from these bodies? Are we like over here and our bodies are here? Or what is our relationship to the world, the history of civilization, and how we solve our problems? This is a pyramid of thinking. The false assumptions of science have led us to believe that life is absolutely a random process. If we had the right time and the right conditions, that life would occur just the way it did somewhere else. The data doesn't support it, but this is what we've been led to believe. We've been led to believe that human life follows the same assumptions, that we are, given the right amount of time, the right conditions, that we would happen just the way we are again. That we are separate and powerless from our bodies is what we've been led to believe, and this is much of the medical system. I've just been through this with the test with my mom this last week. Very interesting insights into the way some very brilliant medical doctors are led to think. That we're separate and independent from our world, and that civilization is a linear experience. It began primitive, one time, boom, here we are, and then that's it. Okay, if all of these were true, they're not. They're false assumptions. If they were true, then I can see where it would make total sense for competition and conflict to be the way we solve our problems. That's what we do today, based on these false assumptions. But the new discoveries are telling us that these are false, and it now is telling us that conflict makes no sense, that competition is not what nature's based upon. So now I'd like to share with you those discoveries and then do something with them. Okay, are we doing all right? I'm going to go really fast. All right. I'm going to move fast because I want you to see all this. But it's based on those false assumptions that we see the breakdown of the systems that we're experiencing today. The crises of our world are showing us where our thinking was incorrect. I'm not going to say that we should judge our past. I'm not going to say we did it wrong. I'm going to say we are on a huge learning curve. And if we're really smart, what we'll say is that what we did in the past got us to where we are today. And we can let it go based on what we now know to be true and move forward, as Ty has helped all of us to envision, without judging the past. That's where we get really hung up, in the criticism of the past. But look at this. Here's the cover of Time magazine. They're seeing global warming, a rhythmic natural cycle, is a war, first of all, so that's the conflict way of thinking, and it's a war that you can win. How are you going to win a war of natural rhythms? The crises today, our false assumptions have caught up with us, okay? They've led to the global extremes that have become the human extremes. And the human extremes directly affect every one of us because they become our personal extremes. We are all affected. This is our family. This is our family. It's the only family we have. And it's not like some of us are going to get through this change without the others. We're all going through it. And we're all going to get to the other side. The question is, what are we like when we get there? That is being chosen in this moment. So I'm going to ask your permission in the best use of time. If you're in this room, I know that you already know some of these are false. You've been with me, you've read the books, you've heard enough other people. If we'd simply say the space between things is empty, you all know it's not, there is no empty space. Are you okay if we cross it out and don't talk about it? Cool. Okay, if we say consciousness separate from our physical world, the new discoveries are showing that consciousness is the basis of the physical world. It's what's left out of the unified field theory. So if we cross that out, are you okay with that? Oh man, we're moving fast. This is great. Okay, the next two are related. Let's look at these two together. Evolution explains life and nature based on survival of the strongest. Both of these are assumptions that were made from a book that was published in 1859 by Charles Darwin. Now, up until 1859, the big questions of life were answered in the realm of religion. The church was believed to hold the answers to many of these questions. Who are we? How do we get here? What's our purpose? So in 1859, Charles Darwin, a scientist, took the first scientific attempt, first stab at answering these through the language of science. His book was called The Origin of Species. And because it was scientific and the first of its kind, the ideas were embraced quickly, they were entrenched deeply, and they were accepted throughout the world and remain entrenched to this moment today in many places. Now, if you go to the bookstore, this is the title that you're going to see. Do you all know about the rest of the title? I'm going to share with you the rest of the title of Darwin's book. It gives insight into his thinking, and it's a whole different vibe of what he was sharing. So the title that we see, if you go to Amazon, for example, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, here's the rest of the title. Or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. And this is his perspective. Now, I want to say something about Darwin. He was a scientist. And I think he was probably a pretty good scientist. In my estimation, the mistake that Darwin made was that he went to one place in the world and he made direct observations of insects and animals there, and he attempted to take what he saw in one place and generalize it and apply it to all life everywhere, including humans. Does that make sense? He took what he saw for some forms of life and tried to make it fit all forms of life. And the facts simply don't support it. The data doesn't support it. So, one of the things that Darwin said, and I want to share his own language. I want you to see Darwin's own words. They're a little flowery in the language, but I want you to see his exact language. Now, this is a scientific book. Tell me if you think this sounds scientific. He's talking about the origin of life itself. Where did it come from? Here's Darwin's definitive scientific explanation. He said, therefore, I should infer from analogy that probably all the organic beings which have ever lived on this earth have descended from some one primordial form into which life was first breathed. Think about that. Infer from analogy that probably, if he talks about into which life was first breathed, where did the breathing come from? These aren't really addressed in his ideas. What he's saying is that there something happened. Life began with a single cell, and from that all life emerged, including you and me. Here's the problem with that. And I'm probably not doing justice to this topic. In the interest of time, I'm going to hit the highlights. As a geologist, I tend to look at the geologic perspective. This is a geologic map of time. The most recent is the present is at the top. This is the oldest at the bottom. You all have heard, if you're in this room, I know you've heard of something called the Big Bang. In physics, it's when the big release of energy and the universe is believed to have begun. There's something in biology called the Big Bang of biology, and it happened right here. About 545 million years ago, a time called the Cambrian. And what we find here is that it's in this time that 98% of all of the forms of life that we see on Earth today all occurred in that relatively narrow window of time. They didn't evolve slowly and gradually over long periods of time. They appeared. I don't know why. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that that is not Darwinian evolution as we've been led to think of it. Here's a little chart right here. Here's all the forms of life that were in the world about 550 million years ago. Boom. Here is what's called the Cambrian explosion right there. Something happened. I don't know what it is, but this is not evolution the way that Darwin thought of it, as slow, gradual changes or punctuated equilibrium, as other biologists have talked about. The data doesn't support that this happened in this way. For life in general, what about humans? What about us? Well, last fall, this is one of the charts that was used on some of those very authoritative documentaries, the human family tree. This is us up at the top right here. And can you see these thin lines that link us? Can you see those lines right? I'm going to highlight them in blue. Right there. Everything that you see in blue, if you look here on the legend, what it says, those are not factual lines. They are inferred or speculative connections. Inferred or speculative, but they're being taught as fact in school. And if any alternative ideas are introduced in the classroom, I don't know about here in Canada, in the States, teachers are losing their jobs for introducing the possibility that an alternative theory may be available. How many of you have heard of Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon? Okay, this should have made national news. The cover of Scientific American or USA Today, it didn't. Neanderthal, when I was in school, I was led to believe Neanderthal was my ancestor. Okay? 1987, I'm just going to do this quickly as a very quick example. 1987, an amazing discovery that could be a whole workshop unto itself was made. There was a Neanderthal infant girl who was found preserved in a cave in northern Europe. Preserved. She wasn't fossilized. She wasn't mummified. She was preserved. Her skin was intact. Her eyes were intact. Her hair was intact. What else was intact? Who said that? DNA. Okay? They are supposed to be our ancestors. All of a sudden, we had DNA from those who were supposed to be our ancestors to compare to us today. It took 3 years for them to publish the results. The results were published in the very prestigious journal Nature in the year 2000. And here is volume 404, March 30th, 2000, page 490. So it's on the audio. You have it. You don't have to write it down. Because this is the deluxe 2-hour Toronto Symposium of 2012, I'm going to cut through the whole study and go to the last sentence of the last paragraph of the bottom line and tell you the conclusion. Here's the conclusion. The bottom line is this, is that the DNA in that Neanderthal girl was not, in fact, part of us. The results suggest that modern human was not, in fact, descended from Neanderthal. Their DNA and our DNA is not similar enough to say that they are our ancestors. Since that time, they found 40 more bodies in various states of preservation. The DNA has borne this out, and it's also told them that the Neanderthal walked the earth with us. We shared the earth with them, which means we could not have descended from them. So now we know who we are not. Okay? We're not descendants of Neanderthal.